I enabled the member for Ryan to display the shirt that had a particular relevance to the debate and to the point he was making. I've made it clear I do not intend to entertain the use of a whole range of props that he's now proposing to display. If the member for Ryan continues to do that, he will leave me with no choice but to take action, and that's not in his interests. I call the member for Ryan.
Well, Mr Deputy Speaker, if I may seek clarification, I was not intending to put forward a dozen items to make my point. My point was only to raise 3 or 4 to suggest a different range of sectors of the economy and a different group of Australians that would be affected, and I'm not sure why that is a problem. With all due respect, Mr Deputy Speaker, and I know you're a fellow Queensland MP, but to me, to all those Australians listening, this is, in my view, a slap in the face to the people of Ryan that I represent, to all those constituents that I've had the great privilege of representing. I can't even come in here as a local member and try to make my point by holding up a little bottle of orange juice to say this orange juice is going to be put in the freezer, it's going to use power, it's going to be cold.
Resume his seat. The Chief Government Whip.
Well, Mr Deputy Speaker, clearly the member for Ryan is disputing your ruling. You've given a ruling. He then wishes to argue after you've made the ruling. I believe his conduct is highly disorderly and disrespectful.
I'm on the point of order. I take it the member for Moncrief.
On the point of order, Mr Deputy Speaker, the member for Ryan, and I am mindful of your comments, has indicated to the chair that he has 3 or 4 items that he wanted to display to talk about the impact of the ETS on ordinary household items. I wouldn't have thought that was excessive, but ultimately I defer to your judgment, of course.
I think the difficulty with the point the member for Moncrief raises is that whilst the quantum, the number, might have some relevance, it's not the determining feature itself. And the nature of the matters being now brought as display items do not, in my opinion, add to the debate, nor is it necessary for the member for Ryan to make his point. I have sufficient confidence in the skill of the member for Ryan that he's able to speak to the issues and without the need for the sorts of props he's now using. And I repeat, for the benefit of the member for Ryan, I did enable him to use the first prop, which was, if you like, not a standard thing which might be deemed to be necessary to assist him in making his point. I do not think apples and orange juice meet the same criteria, and he will not use those props. I call the member for Ryan.
Mr Deputy Speaker, if I may continue, I do recollect in the previous parliament a colleague of ours who brought into the chamber apples and put them on everybody's chair, everybody's desk, to make the point about the significance of apples in his home state of Tasmania. Apples are what Australians eat every day. They are good for our nutrition, and the tax on apples is going to be something that I'm sure is going to be affecting
the member for Ryan
a lot of people all over Australia.
The member for Ryan will resume his seat. The Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr Acting Speaker, I've lost count of the times. I think it's now 4 times the member for Ryan has ignored your ruling to desist from using props. I ask that he be sat down.
I'm reluctant to do that, and I'm endeavouring to enable the member for Ryan to make whatever points he wishes to make in his speech within the confines of the standing orders and the practice. On the last, I think, 3 occasions on which I've made rulings on this matter, the member for Ryan has rather returned to the question of whether the ruling is accurate. I'd advise the member for Ryan to resume his speech on the subject matter or to use the forms of the House if he wishes. I call the member for Ryan.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. And I just make this observation that whilst not a senior member of the House of Representatives, I am in my 3rd term, and with due respect to the Parliamentary Secretary, who's only been here for 2 years, the observations I make are relevant to previous members in this Parliament who have made statements and carried themselves in a certain way to which I was a witness, so I just make that observation. But, Mr Deputy Speaker, in relation to this bill which I'm speaking on again, I know that the people of Ryan and all Australians will be interested to know that when the bill was rejected in the Senate last year, it was rejected by a vote of 41 to 33. 41 to 33. And, Mr Speaker, this was not close. So in the Australian Parliament, our constitutional structure is that the parliament is made up of two houses, the House of Reps and the Senate. And of course, the Senate is just as significant as the House of Representatives. And so for a margin of 41 to 33 being so significant, the audacity, therefore, of the government to bring this bill back can only say one or two things. It can only say that it is hubris, it is arrogance, and to quote a former Prime Minister, it is something that, well, perhaps I shouldn't go there, Mr Deputy Speaker. Mr Deputy Speaker, I just want to make this point again, that 41 to 33 was a major vote of no confidence by the Senate on this bill. And I think that, therefore, this arrogance that the Rudd Labor government is starting to embrace must cease immediately. Now, I'm disappointed that my time is fast running out, but I think I've made my point in relation to orange juices and apples and simple hairdryers that are in probably the drawer of every household in the country, and how these items will be affected by an ETS tax. And the point I wanted to make from that was that the government has not been able to tell Mr and Mrs Smith who live in Canberra, or Mr and Mrs Jones who live in Inogra, or Mr and Mrs Brown who live in Ferny Grove exactly how much extra tax they will pay in year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5, year 6, year 7, year 8, year 9, year 10 after the introduction of this bill. They don't know what the tax is going to be. It's going to be significant, but they are not being told the implications on their household budgets. So that's why it's important. And respecting the view, the request or the invitation of the Deputy Speaker, I won't pull out of my little goodies bag other items that I had. I only had a couple of others. But in relation to my hairdryer, my apple and my orange juice bottle, I had a simple roll of toilet paper, a toilet paper roll. Now, every business in Australia, every household in Australia, every restaurant, well, I shouldn't say every restaurant, but many restaurants, many cafes, they all have bathroom facilities. And, of course, they all have toilet papers in them. Well, I hope they do, because, of course, that's part of their requirement. Now, I don't know what the cost of a toilet roll is going to be in 7, 8 years' time because a consequence of this ETS tax, but I know that there'll be an increase. Why? Because in the paper production, there's going to be energy involved. There's going to be electricity. And to all those people listening out in this great land of ours, do they really think that the compensation that's offered now by this government is really going to be something that will either not be reduced or taken away, or will actually improve their household budget at the end of the day? Well, I'm sure that Australians are smart enough to realise that from toilet paper rolls to buying an apple or an orange juice or using their hairdryer or putting on the TV, all those things, all those items will go up in costs. Now, in relation to this ETS, we've just heard recently that the US President Obama, who's going to grace us with his presence in a few weeks' time, is now backflipping fast on the idea of a US emissions trading scheme. So we alone of major nations will have an ETS if the bill is successful. And of course I count on my colleagues in the Senate to ensure that it doesn't become successful. And I refer to an article by Christian Kerr in the Weekend Australian, and I quote of the 6th of the 2nd, 2010, that says, "Australia is looking increasingly isolated in the global community as Kevin Rudd presses on with his government's emissions trading scheme. US President Barack Obama admitted just 2 days ago he might have to abandon his proposal for emissions trading in favour of direct action in order to steer his carbon-cutting plans through the US. None of the world's top polluters, the US, China, Russia, India and Japan, has an emissions trading scheme. So what do? Good on us. We go out and say, we've got to have an emissions trading scheme. Don't worry about the US. Oh, they're not important. Don't worry about China. Oh, don't worry about India. They're the great polluters. But we'll be what we'll do now, we'll save the world, we'll save civilization, as the Prime Minister says. And I want to end my time is fast running out, so I want to end on the quote of the Prime Minister when he was opposition leader and made this point. 20 million people face, quote, and 20 million people facing one of the great challenges of our civilization and certainly of this country's settled history.
Expired.